The morning they called my name at the Chicago Convention Center, I was already shaking. Not from nerves. Not from excitement. From the fact that I had just spent 20 minutes scanning a crowd of 2,000 people for two faces that were never going to appear. Lee Calloway, Regional Sales Manager of the Year. I walked across that stage with my heels clicking against the polished floor, smiled at my VP, shook his hand, and held up the award for the cameras. People were clapping. Someone in the back row whistled. My colleague Dana was on her feet. And somewhere across the city, my parents were sitting in my younger brother's apartment helping him pack up boxes because his girlfriend of 4 months had just broken up with him. I'm going to say that again because I still sometimes need to say it out loud to believe it. My parents missed the biggest professional achievement of my life because my 22-year-old brother got dumped. I'm the oldest of two. My brother Tyler is 3 years younger than me, and for as long as I can remember, the rules in our house were different depending on which one of us you were. When I was 16 and failed my driving test the first time, my dad said, "You need to study harder. You're not going to get anywhere in life by coasting." He said it at dinner, in front of everyone. When Tyler failed his driving test at 17, my mom made his favorite pasta and said, "Don't worry, baby, you'll get it next time." She called his instructor unfair. I'm not saying this to paint my parents as villains. I used to spend a lot of energy trying to see things from their perspective, trying to find the reasonable explanation. The way this all made sense if you just squinted at it differently. My therapist once told me I was exhausting myself looking for the grace in people who weren't looking for it in me. It took me a long time to really hear what she was saying. What I know is this. I was the one who was supposed to handle things. Tyler was the one who needed to be handled. That's just how it was. Growing up, I made the honor roll every semester from 6th grade to high school. I got a partial scholarship to the University of Illinois. I worked 25 hours a week at a coffee shop my entire freshman year to cover the gap my scholarship didn't. My parents helped Tyler with his first month's rent when he moved into an apartment at 21, even though he had a job and could have covered it himself. I want to be clear that I was not bitter about that at the time. I genuinely wasn't. I was proud of what I'd built on my own. I thought that was just how it went sometimes. Some kids need more help. That's fine. The resentment didn't come from them helping him. It came from what happened every single time I achieved something. My college graduation, they came. But my mom spent the entire dinner afterward on the phone with Tyler, who had gotten into some kind of argument with his then roommate and was upset. I remember sitting across from my dad at the table, both of us kind of staring at our food while she paced around outside the restaurant window, nodding and saying, into her phone. My dad said, "You know how she is. Tyler just needs her more right now." He said it like that was a complete and reasonable explanation. Like that sentence was supposed to land somewhere other than my chest. I nodded. I paid for my own graduation dinner. We didn't take a single photo together that whole trip because the moment we stepped outside, my mom said she needed to drive to Tyler's to check on him, and my dad went with her, and I took the L back to my apartment alone. I told myself it was fine. I was 22. I was grown. I didn't need my parents to make a fuss. I told myself that for a long time. When I got the call about the Regional Sales Manager of the Year award in October, I was sitting in my car in a parking garage in the Loop, eating a sad desk lunch because I'd been too busy to actually go anywhere. My VP, a man named Gordon who does not give out compliments easily, told me I'd been nominated by 3 separate clients, that my numbers were the highest in the Midwest region for the 2nd year in a row, and that the award ceremony was set for January 14th. January 14th. A Saturday. I cried in that parking garage. Not the pretty kind. The kind where your shoulders shake and you can't get any sound out and you sit there with your forehead against the steering wheel. I had worked for this for 6 years. 6 years of 12-hour days and missed weekends and learning how to negotiate contracts in a male-dominated industry where the first question most people asked me in a meeting was whether I could get them a coffee. I called my parents that night. My mom answered on the second ring. "Mom," I said, "I have something to tell you." She was quiet while I explained. Then she said, "Oh, Lee, that's wonderful, honey. She said it the way you say something is wonderful when you're half watching television. I told her the date. I told her it was in Chicago, 20 minutes from their house. I told her the ceremony started at 11 in the morning and there would be a catered lunch afterward. I sent a calendar invite that same night. I texted my dad separately and he responded with a thumbs up emoji and then, 40 minutes later, a longer text saying he was proud of me and couldn't wait to be there. I saved that text. I looked at it a lot over the next few months. 3 days before the ceremony, my mom called me. "Lee, I have to talk to you about something." I was at my kitchen counter sorting through a pile of mail. My stomach dropped before she even got to the next sentence. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. "Tyler's really struggling," she said. "He and Simone broke up last night and he's in a really bad place. He can barely get out of bed. We're worried about him." "Mom," I said. "Okay, that's hard. I feel for him. But the ceremony is Saturday." I know. "You father and I have been going back and forth, but Tyler needs us right now. He asked us to come over and help him pack some of her things and..." "He asked you to help him pack his ex-girlfriend's things?" "She left some stuff there and it's really upsetting him to have it around." I stood at that counter for a moment. I put my hand flat on the cold granite. I remember the feeling of it. "Mom," I said, "I have been planning this for 3 months. You have had this on your calendar for 3 months. I am getting the most significant award of my career in 3 days, and you are telling me you're not coming because Tyler needs help boxing up someone's sweaters? That's not fair, Lee. He's going through a real heartbreak." I know what heartbreak feels like. I went through a real heartbreak 2 years ago and you told me to keep myself busy with work. That wasn't a dig. That was a fact. After my breakup with Joel, my mom had said on an actual phone call, "You've always been so resilient. I'm sure you'll be fine." She hadn't offered to come over. She hadn't helped me pack anything. The silence on the line was long enough that I started to think she might actually hear herself. Then she said, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I hope you understand." I did not understand. But I got off the phone because I was afraid of what I would say if I stayed on it. My dad texted me that night. He said he was sorry. He said Tyler really was in a rough place. He said they'd take me out to a nice dinner to celebrate when things settled down. I did not respond. Saturday morning, I got up at 6:30 and I got dressed. I wore the navy blazer I'd bought specifically for this day. I did my hair the way I only do it when something matters. I drove myself to the Chicago Convention Center and I sat at a table with my coworkers and their families and spouses and I smiled and I chatted and I did not look at the empty chairs beside me. Dana, who has been my closest work friend for 4 years, reached over and squeezed my hand before the program started. "I texted them," she said quietly. "I told your parents they should be here." I looked at her. "You texted my parents. I got your mom's number from your emergency contact form. I hope that's okay. I just thought, what did she say?" Dana hesitated. She said Tyler really needed them. I nodded. I looked back at the stage. I folded my hands in my lap. They called my name 40 minutes later. I walked up there. I took the award. I said thank you. I meant it. And somewhere between the applause and the handshake and the click of the photographer's camera, something very quietly closed inside me. Not dramatically. Not with any particular emotion I could name in the moment. Just a door. Gently shutting. I did not call my parents that afternoon. I did not text. I went to lunch with Dana and 3 other colleagues and I ate a plate of salmon and I had a glass of champagne and I let myself feel proud for a few hours, just for myself. That evening, I was home by 8. I changed into sweatpants. I put the award on my kitchen shelf and stood there looking at it. My phone showed 2 missed calls from my mom and a text from my dad that said, "How did it go? We're thinking of you." As if they'd had somewhere else to be. As if it had been traffic or a flat tire or some unavoidable force of nature. Not a choice they had made 3 days in advance and stuck to without a second thought. I put my phone face down on the coffee table. I made tea. I watched half of a documentary about deep-sea fish. And then I went to bed. The next morning I woke up and I made a decision that surprised even me in its steadiness. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to send a long emotional message. I wasn't going to demand an apology or force a confrontation. I was just going to stop. Stop calling first. Stop filling the silence. Stop sending the invitations and following up and making it easy. Stop being the one who holds the family together by pretending she doesn't notice the weight isn't evenly distributed. I was just going to stop. It took 11 days for my mom to notice. She called on a Sunday evening the way she always does, expecting the usual 45-minute conversation where I ask about Tyler and the neighbors and her book club, and she occasionally asks a surface-level question about my life. I answered. I was polite. I was brief. "You seem off," she said. "I'm fine." "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine." She didn't push it. I think some part of her didn't want to pull the thread. We hung up after 12 minutes. 2 days later, she called again. "Lee, I feel like something's wrong. Are you mad at me?" "I'm not mad, Mom, because we already talked about the ceremony, and Tyler really was." "Mom," I said, "I'm not mad." There's a particular kind of silence that happens when someone tells you they're not mad in a tone that makes it perfectly clear they are something much colder than mad. My mom knows that silence. She's known me for 31 years. She started crying. I want to be honest here, that was hard. Because I love my mother. In spite of everything, in spite of all the years of being the low-maintenance one, the resilient one, the one who didn't need them. I love her. Hearing her cry on the phone pulled at something real in me. But I also noticed something. She was crying because she sensed she was losing something. Not because she'd done something wrong. She hadn't called me to say, "I'm so sorry, Lee. I was wrong to miss that day." She called me to cry about my pulling away. The tears were about her. I said, "I think I just need some space right now." She asked what that meant. I said I'd call her when I was ready. I hung up. The person who called me next, 4 days later, was not my mother. It was my Aunt Ruth. Aunt Ruth is my dad's older sister. She lives in Milwaukee and drives down to Chicago 3 or 4 times a year, always with a casserole and a very direct manner and absolutely no patience for what she calls family theater. She's been divorced twice, has 2 adult kids who adore her, and once told me at Thanksgiving that she had watched my parents undervalue me since I was 7 years old and it made her tired. "Your mom called me in tears," she said when I picked up. "She says you've gone cold on them." "I haven't gone anywhere," I said. "I've just stopped doing all the reaching." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then, that ceremony was important. It was the most important professional day of my life so far. And they went to pack boxes. They went to pack boxes. Ruth made a sound that was somewhere between a sigh and a growl. "Your father should have put his foot down. Dad always follows wherever Mom goes when it comes to Tyler." "I know," she said. "I know he does." A pause. "What do you need, Lee?" I hadn't expected that question. I sat there for a second, just holding my phone. "I think I just needed someone to acknowledge that it wasn't okay," I said. "It wasn't okay," she said, simply and immediately. "It was not okay. What they did was not okay." I pressed my fingers against my eyes. I didn't cry, but it was close. "Come up to Milwaukee for a weekend," she said. "Bring nothing, I'll feed you." I went that Friday. My aunt had done things I hadn't known. Or maybe I'd known them in some peripheral way and simply chosen not to look directly. She told me, over pasta and 2 glasses of wine on her back porch, that she had watched this pattern develop for decades, that at family events my achievements were acknowledged briefly and moved past, while Tyler's smallest victories were celebrated at length. That she had once mentioned this to my father, gently, at a Christmas dinner years ago, and he had said, "Tyler just needs more encouragement." As though encouragement were a finite resource and I was clearly fine and therefore did not require any. "You were always fine," she said. "Do you know what that cost you?" I did know. I had known for a long time without letting myself know that I knew. She told me about the time Tyler had called my parents at 2 in the morning because he'd had a fight with a college roommate, and my parents had driven 45 minutes to his dorm in the middle of the night. She told me she'd asked my mom once, "Would you drive to Lee in the middle of the night?" And my mom had actually paused, and said, "Lee would never call at 2 in the morning. She handles things herself." "She handles things herself," Ruth said, like that was a character flaw. I stared at the backyard for a while. "I started handling things myself," I said slowly, "because every time I needed them, they were already busy being needed somewhere else. That's not a character trait. That's a survival strategy." Ruth pointed her fork at me. "Say that again, to a therapist. Because that is the sentence you need to start with." I went back to Chicago on Sunday. I felt, not better exactly, but like I was standing on more solid ground. Like I had said some things out loud that needed to be in the air. I didn't call my parents. I went to therapy on Tuesday, and I did, in fact, start with that sentence. In the second week of February, my mom sent a long text to the family group chat. It was addressed to me, which was a strange choice, announcing something to someone through a group chat rather than calling them directly. She said she and my dad missed me, that they loved me, that they hoped I understood they hadn't meant to hurt me, that Tyler had been going through something very hard and they'd made a decision in the moment that they now knew had caused me pain. The text ended with, "We hope you'll let us make it up to you." Tyler texted me separately. His message was 3 sentences. "Hey, I heard Mom and Dad missed your ceremony because of me. That wasn't cool. I'm sorry." Tyler's apology, those 3 blunt sentences, hit differently than my mom's 4 paragraphs. Because he didn't explain or justify, he just said it wasn't cool. Coming from him, it meant something. I texted him back. I said thank you, I appreciated it, I wasn't angry at him. This wasn't about him. I did not respond to the group chat. I called my dad in March. Not my mom. My dad. This was intentional. My dad is the quieter one. The one who goes along. The one who has spent 30 years making peace instead of making decisions. But underneath that, somewhere, there is a man who texted me, "I'm proud of you and I can't wait to be there," and meant it and then didn't come. He answered right away. Lee. His voice had that careful quality of someone who has been waiting for a call and is afraid of what it means. "Hi, Dad." We were quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm sorry about the ceremony. I know. I should have come. Even if your mother stayed with Tyler, I should have been there. That was wrong." That was more than I expected from him. I felt something shift. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course." If Tyler had been getting an award, if he'd been named Salesperson of the Year or something, and I'd been going through a breakup, what would you have done? The silence lasted long enough that it was its own answer. "Dad." "I don't know," he said. "Maybe the same thing." Another pause. "No. Probably not, I repeated. "Lee, I'm not trying to be cruel. I just needed you to hear yourself say it." He was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was different. "Your mother and we always thought you never seemed to need." "I know," I said. "You thought I was fine." I worked very hard to seem fine because every time I wasn't, something else was more important. He didn't have a response to that. I didn't need him to. "I love you, Dad," I said. "I'm going to need some time. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk more." "Okay," he said quietly. "I love you too." Spring came slow that year. I got deep into a new quiet project that kept me at the office until 8 most nights, which sounds bleak but actually felt clean. The particular satisfaction of work that asks everything of you and gives back something real. Aunt Ruth came down to Chicago in April. We went to the Art Institute, which she'd never been to, and stood for a long time in front of a Hopper painting. She said, "This is what I always thought your childhood looked like. A lot of being in the room but not quite in it." I thought about that for a long time. My mom and I started talking again in April, haltingly. Short calls. I let her do most of the talking for a while. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because I was learning something. She had spent so long explaining herself to me that she had stopped asking about me. When I started filling the silence less, she started asking more questions. Real ones. About my work. About what I was reading. About whether I was happy. It was slow. Some conversations ended awkwardly, but something was moving. My dad sent me a card in May, actual paper in an envelope with a stamp. It said he'd been thinking about what I'd said on the phone, and he wanted me to know he heard me. He said he'd started talking to someone, a counselor, once a week because he wanted to understand some things about himself and the family dynamics better. He said he wasn't expecting a response, he just wanted me to know. I kept the card. June came. My company asked me to present at a regional conference in Indianapolis, a keynote talk, my first one, an hour in front of 300 people. I prepared for 2 months. I worked with a speaking coach. I rewrote the presentation 4 times. A week before the conference, I called my parents. I'm giving a keynote talk in Indianapolis on the 21st, I said. I have 2 extra tickets. My mom said, we'll be there. Not we'd love to come or let me check with your father. Just, we'll be there. They were there. My dad sat in the 3rd row. My mom was beside him. I could see them when I walked out onto the stage. Really see them. Not scanning for empty chairs, actually finding their faces in the crowd. I gave the talk. It went well. Afterward, in the lobby, my mom hugged me for longer than she usually does. She didn't say anything. She just held on. My dad shook my hand, which is his version of the same thing. We had dinner at a restaurant I'd picked, good food, not too expensive, a place I actually liked. We talked for 2 hours. Tyler came up once, briefly, and then we moved on to other things. My things. A conversation that was actually mostly about me. It wasn't a resolution exactly. There wasn't a single moment where everything was fixed and the years of imbalance were rebalanced and we all walked out into the parking lot transformed. But it was a beginning. A real one, built on something different than pretending. I still have the award on my kitchen shelf. Some mornings I walk past it and don't even notice it. Other mornings I stop and look at it for a second, not with pride exactly, but with something like recognition. A marker of the place where things changed, not the ceremony. What came after? The door that closed. The call I made to my dad. The weekend in Milwaukee with Ruth. The therapist's office on Tuesday evenings. I used to tell the story of my family the way I had been taught to tell it. Tyler needed more. I was fine. That was just how we were. I told it that way for years. I told it that way for myself. Which is the most expensive kind of telling. The thing about being the resilient one, the capable one, the one who handles things, is that people will let you. They will always let you. And you'll keep doing it because it becomes the only way you know how to be loved in that family. This conditional, achievement-based, never quite enough love that you've spent your whole life earning. Until one day, you walk across a stage alone and something quietly closes and you start to realize that resilience was never supposed to be a synonym for invisible. I'm not invisible anymore. I decided that. And I keep deciding it. Every day, which is how these things actually work. Not a single grand moment of transformation, but a series of small decisions to keep standing in your own life. To not play a bit part in your own story. I've thought a lot about the word fine. How many years I spent being it, performing it, wearing it like a second skin so well that even I forgot it was a costume. The thing about growing up as the capable one, the one who figures it out, pays her own way, doesn't call at 2 in the morning, is that you don't realize for a long time that you trained the people around you to need you less. Every time I handled something on my own, every time I swallowed the disappointment and moved on, I was teaching my parents a lesson I never intended to teach, that I didn't require showing up for, that my milestones were optional, that the cost of missing them was low. And they learned it. They learned it so well that when the most important morning of my professional life came around, they chose packing boxes without a second thought. Not because they didn't love me, but because I had never once shown them what it cost me when they didn't come. That's not blame. That's just cause and effect. I kept absorbing the weight silently, and the weight kept getting handed to me, because that's what happens when you never put it down. What changed for me wasn't the ceremony. It was the moment I stopped filling the silence. Stopped sending the first text, Stopped making it easy for everyone to stay comfortable while I quietly carried everything alone. When I let the gap actually exist, when I stopped rushing to close it, something real happened. My mom started asking questions she'd never asked before. My dad picked up the phone and said things he'd kept swallowed for years. Even Tyler, in 3 blunt sentences, said more than my parents managed in 4 paragraphs. That's what happens when you stop absorbing. People either step forward or they don't. And either way, you finally know where you stand. Aunt Ruth told me something that weekend in Milwaukee that I keep coming back to. She said resilience is a gift, but it can be stolen from you quietly over years by people who confuse your strength with not needing anything. The most intelligent thing I ever did wasn't landing a regional award or negotiating a difficult contract. It was learning to distinguish between being strong and being silent. They are not the same thing. I had been treating them like they were my whole life. The keynote in Indianapolis wasn't just a talk, it was proof. Proof that showing up for myself, taking up space, saying this matters and I need you there, that those things don't make you needy or dramatic. They make you honest. And honesty, I've learned, is the only foundation anything real can be built on. Not the performed kind, not the kind that protects other people's comfort at your own expense. The kind that says, I matter here. My life is not a bit part. I am not invisible. I'm still working on that. Some days are easier than others, but I keep deciding it. That's the whole thing. You keep deciding it every day, and slowly it stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like just who you are.